It's going.
So, Swiffer. Did anyone enjoy that story at the very beginning? I thought it was interesting. If I didn't know that it was going to connect to the rest of the book, I probably wouldn't have cared in the slightest. Like, for instance, when I was hanging out with Julie when she read it, she was like, I just read 7 pages about the invention of a Swiffer. Did that have a purpose? Well, it did. Now that I've read farther into the book, it definitely had a purpose. It talks about the creative process without directly talking about it. So my first quote here, every creative journey begins with a problem. This is something that I really kind of thought about, this the quote in general, before I put it in with the creative process. If you think about where you're going, right? So you decide to go on a trip, and you're driving, you don't really have a purpose, you're just going. For me, especially because I'm someone who likes structure, that would not go well. I would be all over the place. I'd probably turn back around and come home. I wouldn't even bother going forward with it. And I think there are definitely people who can go out and just not bother with the structure of a trip, just randomly going. But it definitely helps to have a drive and a purpose to go forward in your journey. So with this quote, that's how it starts. You have a problem. You've thought about it. You've just invested yourself in it. And in the Swiffer story, that's exactly what happened. They had invested themselves so much into this invention, trying to make it better, trying to make a mop better, that they just couldn't. They had gotten to the point where it could ruin the floor, it could hurt skin, like chemical burns. So they were like, all right, we just have to start over. We can't go anywhere. They had a problem. They were invested. So they sat down and watched for, I believe it said 9 months, videos of people cleaning floors. I don't know about you, I would get really bored, whether or not I was trying to figure out the problem. So in this process of watching these videos, it took them back to the beginning. It got them acquainted with the problem. They could understand it forwards and backwards. They could just tell you exactly what they needed, but they couldn't make it click. They didn't know what would make it work. So in the same way with Bob Dylan, and that's how I make the connection, because it's about Bob Dylan too, he had a problem. His problem was he didn't want to be a part of this mainstream. You have deadlines for this music that you have to write that is, at this point, nothing that you're into. It's nothing that you actually, you enjoy it, but you're losing your joy for it. You don't like this mainstream that's going on. He didn't dig it, as he says in the book. He didn't dig it. Right? So he went off on his own. He wanted to get away. He wanted to reacquaint himself with the beginning and being by himself. And he wanted to try something new, but obviously, as we all know, because we've all read it, I'm sure, he wanted to try something new to see if that would give him the joy that writing music did originally. My second, it's actually a quote. I forgot to put quotations around it. Sorry. Imagination has a wicked sense of irony. I love this quote. I love this quote. It's very true. Something that we've talked about this year is a series, like a portion of the creative process where you're incubating and you're just meditating on it and you're thinking, but then you just gotta kind of let it sit. You just gotta let it sit there and walk away from it sometimes. Like I know you said you tend to, Dr. Schneller, you tend to walk around and just kind of walk your dog around campus, and so you just kind of let it sit there. Well, that's kind of how creativity works. The Swiffer invention, that was kind of what happened. Something random and sporadic, like after sitting there for 9 months, watching videos that were oh so exciting, it brought to them something that was completely different. And this difference was what made everything click. They were in a routine, they were kind of just settled. They were like, yep, we're looking for an answer to the problem, but so far nothing has happened, and we're just sitting here. And so because it had time, that 9 months, which I thought was also ironic, 9 months. Get it?
That's fine.
All right, there we go. Yeah, you're paying attention. Big birthday. So that's what happens. Creative idea just sprung because of something randomly happening. Like, who would have thought that, something that I use every single day, to clean my house or to go and clean the office that I clean, I use it all the time. was invented because an old lady decided to bend over and wipe up some coffee grounds off the floor with a paper towel. Like, that's pretty nuts. With Bob Dylan, he was alone in a cabin, trying to move away, and that was when he wrote one of his most creative songs, at least the book says was one of his most creative songs. You know, he tried to move away from what he liked to do because it wasn't enjoyable for him anymore. But then it just happened. Everything clicked. He was away from everything that he hated, so he got to enjoy it again. And then that comes to the insight experience, which is also from the book. You're supposed to do something with it. There was, and I apologize, I can't remember his name, but there was a story of, I believe it was a eureka moment. He was taking a bath or something, and something hit him, and he like jumped up and he ran to the king, stark naked. Like, that'd be kind of weird. But he had to do something with it immediately. Like the Swiffer invention, what happened was they took it and then they had to draw it out, and then they had to talk it out. They had to develop it further. And the same thing with Bob Dylan. Like, he said that when you start writing, you can't stop. You just have to keep going. You don't know where the heck you're going with it, but you just have to keep developing it, or else it's going to be gone. And I know that for me, that's definitely the same kind of thing. Like, this presentation, these note cards, I kind of wrote down this morning because I was like, okay, if I don't write down my idea for this presentation, the idea isn't going to develop. I'm not going to have words to say. I'm not going to be able to think straight. I'm going to go off on a rabbit trail and be gone for a very long time. So I have to write it down. That's something for me. And we've talked about personal applications, and that's why we're doing the questions. We have to make you think. So I want you to think about this. Have you ever been involved in the creative process? Some of you, it's kind of obvious. I mean, creative writing. Music, you know, the stuff that people qualify as creative processes. But like in sport can be creative and that kind of thing. But I want you to really think about it, and I want you to explain when we get in the circle, or it can develop from there if you have other questions, because that's how this works. I want you to explain that creative process. I want you to vividly remember it and tell it to us.